18, Cabarrus County Board of Commissioners work session. Welcome. It's good to see everybody today. First up is the approval of our work session agenda, which you all have before you. Do I hear a motion that we approve the agenda, including the changes on page 171? Okay, have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes, and we move to discussion items. First up is Cardinal Innovations Healthcare Solution Dashboard Report, and we are happy to have Reed Thornburg with us to deliver that report tonight. Welcome.
Commissioners, county staff, my name is Reed Thornburg. I'm the Senior Community Executive for Cardinal Innovations Healthcare for the Piedmont Territory for Community Relations, which includes Cabarrus County. And I'd like to start by saying a thank you to the commissioners for your continued support for the Mental Health Advisory Board in Cabarrus County. I know that Ms. Ramirez and County Manager Downs have worked very hard to continue to make sure that that group supports the efforts and mental health initiatives in Cabarrus County. So thank you all for your support with that. So what you have before you for the dashboard for the second quarter would be the October through December data. I do have the third quarter that I mentioned to Ms. Poplin that I'll make available to you all within the next week, so you'll have that third quarter data coming to you. So what you see is the data is through February 24th of this year. Our providers, as I've mentioned historically, who provide services and bill for those services have up to 90 days from the date of service to bill for that service. So that's one of the reasons why there typically is a delay in the report itself. What you'll see on page 5, I believe, is a comprehensive listing of services where county maintenance of effort dollars are intended to be dispersed to primarily for Cabarrus County would be Daymark recovery services and crisis service oriented. So you'll see that 42.1% there is close to the 50% that we'd like to be at. Again, there are still, or at the time, over some outstanding claims that had not, they had through the end of March to be able to bill for services. So you'll see an updated number when I send out the third quarter. And then on the next page, you'll see a comprehensive from July 1 going forward. You'll see the individuals served by age and diagnosis and also unmet needs for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities who are awaiting an innovations waiver slot that is provided to us by the state to be able to support individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. What you'll see is a trend on this page in the number of child mental health members being served over time. Next page. Here, I just want to point out that in comparison, you'll see in the blue the July 16 through December of 17 for emergency department. There is an increase there compared to the previous time period. For outpatient emergency department, you'll see a decrease as compared to the previous year. Next page. Here you'll see the distinct members served for state funding. Nothing stood out there as far as a comparison, unless you have questions about the state funding compared to Medicaid. Next page. And here you'll see the members served for facility-based crisis, which you do have facility-based crisis located in Cabarrus County in Concord that's operated by Daymark Recovery Services. They also partner with Sheriff Riley with the Stepping Up Initiative and the jail case manager clinician that you have available there as well, which is a very good partnership and collaboration and then you'll see mobile crisis services. So for Medicaid, you'll see that facility-based crisis numbers are up compared to the prior year. Mobile crisis is down. And then expenses will reflect the same change. And then for state, you'll see the same changes as well, the same trends. You'll see an increase in facility-based crisis and a decrease in mobile crisis management. Next page. And just in summary of provider information that's available to you, total providers for our entire 20-county network of providers, contracted providers, is around 950 at the time of this report. For Cabarrus County, to the right column at the top, you'll see the top 10 providers by individuals served, members served, and what type of entity that provider is. So you'll see that Daymark is the service provider of the greatest number of individuals that were served for that period, and historically that's been consistent. And then as far as, just make note, on the bottom right, call abandonment rate, this is our access call center. This is our 1-800 number for individuals to call to gain initial portal of access to services, should they choose, as compared to walk-in to clinics. And you'll see that Cardinal Innovations is almost halfway below our target for the number of calls that are abandoned when someone calls in. And so we do have a track record, very good track record of not only answering calls, the speed to answer calls, but also not abandoning calls as well when someone calls in the 800 number. And the next page just has an analysis. I've touched on a few of those, but as a brief summary of the report that you have before you. Page 12. I do want to make note that there was an error on here. The RTS Transportation, that provider is not in the Cabarrus County area, and so that was reported inaccurately. That applies to the triad area for Alamance Caswell. And then the last page, you have a summary of services, intensive services per state definition that are funded typically through maintenance of effort dollars. And entertain any questions or comments that you have.
Reed, what was the basic, I can't think of the question I want to ask, the unmet needs? What were the basic unmet needs?
So typically that is someone who doesn't have a waiver slot, and they are placed on the registry in order to have the option of waiting on a slot to become available, or being able to access alternative services to a waiver slot. And so the unmet needs would be individuals who've identified, there's been a service or service identified to meet, that would meet their needs. It's just not available at the time, either because a waiver slot isn't available or someone potentially has not accepted an alternative service and are waiting for a waiver slot. Again, those waiver slots are made available by the state. Cardinal does not make those. We don't initiate or originate those waiver slots.
Other questions for Reed?
I have one real quickly. Can you explain, back on your very first slide, where you've got Cabarrus funding and where you've got CRC Kannapolis and CRC Union, more money is flowing in that direction? Can you explain that?
And so what we do is we proportionately designate the funding dollars to each site. What you'll see is that the expenses for those two sites are dependent upon the number of individuals who are gaining access to those sites for care. For instance, if and Daymark utilizes all of their facility-based crisis settings, that would be Lexington, for the Piedmont area, that would be Lexington, Monroe, and Concord, as well as their Iredell County Statesville site also serves for overflow. So if let's say the facility in Concord is full, then individuals potentially would get referred and assisted with transportation by Daymark at those other facilities. So they serve as overflow. So it could be that potentially those are full settings and individuals are being seen at other sites. So,
Thanks.
yeah, and Daymark, just so you know, Daymark does transport between sites, and unless someone is at a high acuity or is a danger to self or others, they're not requiring law enforcement to transport between their facilities. They are assisting with that transportation.
So Reed, for the benefit of the public, are there any services that Cardinal provides that are available to folks that are not eligible for Medicaid?
Currently, those only services would be state-funded services that typically are available through our outpatient clinics, Daymark, RHA, for crisis walk-in for outpatient services, outpatient needs, individuals who are uninsured or underinsured, and they still apply a sliding fee scale for those individuals, but there are state funds that are available for walk-in outpatient services.
So the state funds that are
And
available
for substance use services.
through Cardinal?
So it's state funds that are, the state makes available to Cardinal to reimburse
Okay.
for services to providers. And there are a number of substance use services that are state funded as well because they don't fall under a Medicaid funded category.
Right. We just hear conversation from a lot of folks that have private insurance and that some providers do not accept that. Is that correct?
That's correct. And then there are some providers who are only paneled with certain insurance carriers and will accept that. And then there are only certain clinician levels that can bill for Medicare as well. And so with some providers, it's dependent on who they're paneled with insurance-wise and whether or not they'll serve individuals with private insurance.
But what percentage of the services offered by Cardinal would you say are for Medicaid eligible?
It would be the majority of our services.
98%? Probably?
Yes, 90th percentile.
Right.
Yes.
And I hear the question come up from time to time, you know, well, why would Cardinal not be able to help with this situation?
Right.
And that typically is my answer, is I don't think you have the ability to provide services other than Medicaid in most instances.
Unless state funds are appropriated specific to those services, we're a public managed entity. And so
Right.
we fall under the guidelines of Medicaid funded service definitions for behavioral health services.
Right.
And those are the services that are reimbursed.
Okay.
And
Any
so,
other
yeah,
questions?
I do know it's a challenge. I know it's been brought up several
Yeah.
times,
Oh,
especially
yeah.
individuals that potentially have private insurance, but yet still find it very difficult to afford the additional copay or the cost associated with that private insurance.
Right. Okay. Other questions for Reed? We thank you for being here.
Thank you, and I'll have those numbers available within the next week for third
Yeah,
quarter.
and I do serve on their community board, and we go through these figures quarterly,
Quarterly.
all around the year, so we are paying attention to them.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate you coming. Thank
Thank
you. Okay, next we move to item 3.2 from Communications and Outreach, and we're happy to have Kasha Thompson for the presentation of the 2018 Community Survey. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And again, this year, I'd like to also welcome to the table Jason with ETC Institute. He is going to talk you through their survey findings. This is the 10th year we've done a survey, or within the last 10 years, we've done all of our surveys with ETC Institute. We've had a great track record with them for performance and evaluation. And this year is no exception to that. And I'll let Jason start, and I'll grab the clicker real quick.
Great, thanks. Well, my name is Jason Murato. I'm a senior project manager at ETC Institute. And ETC is a marketing and research firm based in Olathe, Kansas. And the thing that we specialize in is doing community surveys for city and county governments And this past May and June, for the 5th time, we administered a community survey for Cabarrus County. The first time was in 2008. So today I'll go through the major findings from the survey. Now, the full report is very comprehensive. It's about 200 pages and goes into a lot more detail. So today, really what we're doing is just hitting the highlights and going through the key findings. So I do have one slide about ETC Institute. We're based in Olathe, Kansas, but we're a national leader in providing market research for local governments. We've been doing this type of work for over 30 years. And in the last 10 years alone, we've done surveys in more than 900 communities in 49 states. And that includes a lot of communities throughout the state of North Carolina. So this is really the type of work that we specialize in. So this is just a quick overview of what I'll be going through, the purpose and methodology of the survey. What I call the bottom line up front is our main conclusions. And then I'll go through the major survey findings to show how we came to those conclusions. And I'll be happy to take any questions as well. So there's several reasons to do a survey like this. One is to objectively assess how satisfied residents are with major county services, and also determine residents' top priorities for the county. Also with this survey, we're able to measure trends from the previous surveys. Each time we tweak the questions a little bit, but a lot of the questions do remain the same year after year. And then also with this survey, we're able to measure your performance with other communities all across the country. So this survey was administered by a combination of mail, online, and phone to randomly selected households throughout the county. And that's really our standard methodology for these types of surveys, primarily mail and online. Our goal was to get at least 400 completed surveys, and we had a good response. We actually ended up with 436 completed surveys. And one thing we always do when we administer these surveys is as we collect the data, we check the demographics to make sure it reflects the actual population of the county. So we're monitoring age, race, ethnicity, and gender to make sure we have a good representation. And the results of these 436 surveys at the 95% level of confidence has a margin of error of plus or minus 4.7%. So essentially that means if we did this survey the same way 100 times, 95 times the results would be plus or minus 4.7% from what we're reporting. So the results aren't perfect, but really it's a very small margin of error. So here you can see we have a map of the county. The red dots are households that completed a survey. So we had a really good distribution throughout the county. And this is very similar to the previous surveys that we've done as well. So here's our main conclusions from the survey. We found that residents have a very positive perception of the county. We'll look at this in more detail in a little bit. And you'll see that residents gave very high ratings to the county as a place to live, as a place to raise children, and just to the overall quality of life in the county. We also found that overall, the level of satisfaction with county services is significantly higher in Cabarrus County than it is in other communities. You rate it much higher than the national average in 19 out of the 20 areas that we compared. And one of the areas that especially stands out is that you rated 20% above the national average in the overall quality of county services. And really, this is one of the most important questions on the survey, because here we're asking residents to take into account all the services that the county provides and really give an overall satisfaction rating. And then we found that residents' top priorities for county leaders are growth management, crime prevention, protecting water quality and the environment, and county schools, education facilities. So first we'll take a look at some general perceptions that residents have of the county. Here we asked residents to rate their perception of the county in a number of different ways. The dark blue are residents who gave a rating of an 8 or a 9 on a 9-point scale. The lighter blue is 6 or a 7. The white is a rating of 5, so it's really neutral or average. Then the pink are ratings of 1 to 4. So the blue ratings are, the blue colors are positive, the pink is negative. So overall, the positive ratings far outweigh the negative. And if you take a look at the top of this list, most residents are satisfied with how safe they feel in their neighborhood during the day. Also, very high satisfaction ratings with the county as a place to raise children and as a place to live. Most residents feel safe in their neighborhood at night. If you look at the bottom row, the lowest rated item is the value received for tax dollars and fees. But you can see that 55% of residents are satisfied with the value they receive for tax dollars and fees. And that might seem like a low number compared to the rest of this list, but the national average is actually a little below 40%. So that's actually a really, really good number. Now, we asked residents how satisfied they are with various aspects of living in the county. So again, the blue is the positive ratings, the pink is the negative. If you look at the top of this list, the highest rated items are emergency response times, colleges' educational facilities, non-emergency response time, courthouse facilities. For all of those, more than 75% of residents gave a positive rating, 11% or less a negative. And then the lowest rated items at the bottom of this list are growth management, ensuring the availability of affordable housing, and then the availability of housing options. And one of the areas on the survey with the highest satisfaction ratings are customer service from county employees. And these numbers are based on people who have actually contacted the county within the past year, which was almost 40% of survey respondents. And you can see for all 5 of these areas, more than 50% of residents were very satisfied. About 80% or more were either very satisfied or satisfied. So really high satisfaction ratings in all areas of customer service. Now here you can see again, we have the map of the county. What we did here is we broke the results down by zip code, and this tells us how residents in different parts of the county rate services. Now this one is for the county as a place to live. The entire map is blue, so this means that residents in all parts of the county are satisfied with the county as a place to live. And in fact, the dark blue is the highest possible satisfaction rating you can get, so there's quite a bit of dark blue on this map. Now here, this map shows how residents rate the county as a place to raise children. Again, the entire map is blue, which means the residents throughout the county feel like the county is a good place to raise children, with the dark blue being the most positive rated areas. So we also did some benchmarking comparisons, and we found that overall satisfaction with county services is significantly higher in Cabarrus County than other communities. So over these next few charts, the blue line are Cabarrus County residents who gave positive ratings. The yellow are positive ratings from residents from all across the U.S. This first slide is for how residents rate the county as a place to raise children, as a place to live, as a place to work, and as a place to retire. And you can see all 4 areas, you rate it significantly higher than the national average. Here are comparisons for perceptions of the community. Again, in all these areas, you rate significantly above the national average, with the exception of growth management, which is that bottom row. Even for that one, you're just 4% below the national average, but everything else is much higher. A couple of areas I want to point out here is starting with the 4th row down, overall quality of county services. Again, here residents are taking into account all the services that the county provides, and you can see you're 20% above the national average. And then if you go to the 2nd row from the bottom, value received for tax dollars and fees, you have a 55% satisfaction rating. The national average is only 38%. And then here are comparisons for customer service. All 5 of these areas you can see you rate significantly higher than the national average. So much higher as far as how residents are being treated by county employees, the accuracy of information and assistance that they're given. You're actually almost 30 points above the national average in that area. Also, residents were very satisfied with how easy the county is to contact, how quickly staff responds, and then how well their issue is handled. You can see there you're almost 40 points above the national average. And then the last benchmarking slide we have, this is for emergency services. And again, all 3 of these areas, emergency medical, fire marshal, sheriffs, all 3 significantly higher than the national average. In each case, at least 10 points above the national average. So now we'll take a look at the trends compared to the previous surveys. Overall, the ratings are down a little bit from the last survey, but that's a trend we've seen all over the country, so it's really no different than we've seen in communities all across the U.S. The areas with the biggest increases in satisfaction since the last survey, which is 2 years ago, are the ease of navigating the county's website, library books and materials collected, and then library operating hours. The areas with the biggest decreases in satisfaction over the past couple of years are growth management, availability of housing options, ensuring the availability of affordable housing, veteran services, and then senior services. Now, we also took a look at the comparisons to 2010, so we're going back 8 years ago. The areas with the highest level of satisfaction increase since 2010 are the way residents have been treated by county employees, library operating hours, employment opportunities, and the county as a place to work. The areas with the biggest decreases in satisfaction since 2010 are ease of travel in the county, growth management, availability of housing options, and then adult library programs. So we also took a look at the highest priorities for residents. So this is what we call the important satisfaction rating. And this is a tool that was created by ETC Institute, and it's really a great way to help communities set priorities. This analysis is based on 2 questions on the survey. First, we asked residents how satisfied they are with the variety of items. And then the follow-up question is which of these areas should be the highest priority for county leaders. So the idea behind this chart is the items that have a combination of a low satisfaction rating, but also a very high importance rating should be the highest priorities. So based on that, the highest priority is growth management. Residents rate that as the second most important item on this list, and it ranked last out of these 16 in terms of satisfaction. And then there's 3 areas we identified as being a high priority: crime prevention, protecting water quality in the environment, and then county schools, educational facilities. And this was a new question we asked on the survey this year. We did ask it a couple years ago, but in a slightly different way. Here we asked residents which of these areas they'd be most willing to pay more to avoid reductions in service or decreased quality. And you can see we had a variety of responses provided, with the top one being county parks, followed by emergency preparedness, libraries, and then veteran services. Now, we also had on the survey several questions related to communication. We asked residents which sources of information are the most important to them to get information about the county. And you can see the top 3 are Google or other online search engine, county's website, and mail. We asked residents if they find programs on Cabarrus County TV entertaining, informative, or helpful. This is based on people who have watched Cabarrus County TV in the past year, which was about 1/3 of survey respondents. So of those who have watched Cabarrus County TV, over 80% found the programs entertaining, informative, and helpful. And you can see that's the highest of any of the years that we've asked the question. We asked residents if they're aware of the county's website. 75% said yes. A little bit of a decrease from the last survey, but pretty consistent of where it's been over the last few surveys. And of those who are aware of the county's website, 92% said they visited the website within the past 6 months. We asked residents if the county's website is easy to navigate. If you look at that bottom pie chart, 82% said yes, so that's an increase of about 3% from the last survey. We saw a dip from 2014 to 2016, but now the ratings are going back up. And then just a few other various survey findings. This is a new question we asked in this survey for the first time. We asked residents how familiar they are with Cabarrus County's brand, Cabarrus County, America Thrives Here. And 14% are either very familiar or familiar. And really, we're looking to have between 15 and 25% of residents who are either familiar or very familiar with the brand and also with the logo, which is the next chart we'll see. So this is pretty much within that range. We asked residents how familiar they are with Cabarrus County's logo, and the survey had an actual picture of the logo on it, as did the online survey. Here, 24% of residents are either familiar or very familiar. So really pretty good ratings for kind of a new campaign. Then we asked residents how many times they visited or used Camp T and Spencer, Frank Lisk, Rob Wallace, or Vietnam Veterans Park in the past year. And 75% have visited those parks at least once in the past year. So that's up 2% from a couple of years ago. So just a quick recap. We found that residents have a very positive perception of the county. You saw most residents feel like the county is a good place to live and to raise children. Overall satisfaction with county services is much higher in Cabarrus County than other communities, especially when it comes to the overall quality of county services, and then in all different areas of customer service. And then residents' top priorities for county leaders are growth management, crime prevention, protecting the water quality and the environment, and county schools education facilities. So with that, does anyone have any questions or comments?
So I have two questions. I think you said 436 people responded to the
Right.
survey.
Mhm.
Do you have a breakdown of whether they were mail or online or phone?
We do have that. I believe it's in the report. There's very few by phone. It's mainly mail and online. I don't remember what the
That's
exact
fine.
numbers are, but I can
can find
definitely
it.
find them.
That was just a lot of pages. I can't remember all that.
Sure.
And then on page 179, where it said the county rates 20% above the national average in 19 of the 20 areas that were compared, was that one, the growth management, or something else?
That, right, growth management is the only area that rated below.
Okay,
Yep,
just making sure.
exactly.
Thank you.
Yep.
So there are two different things we were measuring with the survey. The first set of questions, which talks about growth management and other issues, is your general impression as a resident of Cabarrus County, how you feel about these things. And some of those things we as the county agency have control over, and others we work with our partners to accomplish. And then you have a second category, which are your services that we do. And then you have the challenges of you have excellent services, but how many people know about it? And so there's certainly a number of variables that go into it. But I think overall, it's great information that we get, and we just had a meeting with department heads, and we went over the same survey, and they're looking to find new ways to use the information and introduce new topics to their employees to try to find new ways to do it. And I also want to say, the brand is really based on this survey, and yet again, staff has come through to show why America thrives here, and that this is a place with strong foundation that they create through their excellent customer service. So I definitely want to take a minute to acknowledge their contributions.
Okay, other questions? We could probably spend many hours talking about this, but I think the things that you pointed out that had dropped were the obvious things that we continue to feel the impacts of growth and traffic and all of the other things that go with it. So certainly kudos to staff. That's some pretty high ratings.
It's very impressive.
There. Okay. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being with us.
Great, thanks.
Okay, next item, 3.3, infrastructure and asset management, historic courthouse clock tower repairs, and we're happy to have Mr. Billifer.
Good evening. I wanted to update the board on the structural improvements to the historic courthouse clock tower. I know that you have in the past 2 years probably had visits from the Cabarrus Time Savers, the different individual groups that have teamed together to actually do a restoration of the actual mechanism that runs the clock up there, both chiming of the bell and turning of the actual arms on the clock. Of course, before we move forward with any of that, it's the county's responsibility to make that access up to that level safe. I don't think any of you, besides Jonathan, have been up to that clock tower, but I assure you what's in place is not safe, nor does it meet code. So a year and a half ago, we engaged a local architect and a structural engineer to design an actual, to be able to create a bid package to go in there and replace all those old wooden stairs and ladders with something that is structurally sound and code compliant. We've gotten to the point where that design is complete, and we're actually moving forward with engaging that same architect and structural engineer to be able to handle the bidding and construction administration process of it. With the budget being approved, one of the projects that we carry in our operating budget for infrastructure and asset management and our account number 9501 was an estimated cost to make those structural repairs. So I wanted to take this opportunity to come to you and tell you that we're moving forward with bidding out those repairs. Part of that project will be getting the clock mechanism out of there prior to making these repairs, because obviously you can't replace the floor when something that's 900 pounds is sitting on it. So Tom Nunn, who's the contract and risk coordinator, and I are working on an agreement with the Cabarrus Time Savers and the, I guess, technical expert that they have engaged is a gentleman out of Ohio that does nothing but restore historic clocks all around the country. And in fact, we had engaged with him long before Cabarrus Time Savers ever came to us. Those two gentlemen will actually, with part of infrastructure and asset management staff, they'll be taking apart that mechanism and removing it from the current establishment and taking that off-site. And that's why we obviously have to have a pretty significant contract in place and insurance in place for all of that. And they'll be, I guess, refurnishing about 70% of it, and then they're going to have to fabricate probably about 30% of the original parts. And if I had Cabarrus Time Savers, they would probably tell me that those percentages are a little bit off. They've done a lot of research on what year that clock was built, where it was supposed to go, why it ended up here, and who made it, and whose brother drove it here and everything. And they know every part about it. But that will be the project. So as that actual mechanism is being refurbished and rebuilt, the county will go in there and get the structure in place so that once all of that is rebuilt, that can be carried back up there and installed. And obviously, we'll be engaging communications and outreach and all of that. It'll be a very public project in terms of the outreach on it. And there is an attachment. Angela, if you could go to the attachment of this agenda item. This just shows kind of their process in terms of, this is from the Cabarrus Time Savers, in terms of the process they're going to go through to get everything out and what they're going to have to refabricate, refurbish, or actually forge themselves to put it all together. And it just gives some highlights, as you can see, where it came from, all the different parts of it, and what the condition of. So that document actually just is a brief summary of how they're going to get all this done, and you're more than welcome to review it. But I know some of you have definitely heard from this group before, and we've had some meetings with them. So we are moving forward, and I just wanted to make the board aware of that.
Kyle, could you tell us a little bit more about Cabarrus Time Savers as a name that's new to me? Maybe that's the group that I met with along with you.
It is before they had that formal name. So you met with that's
okay.
Correct. So Daughters of the American Revolution and different members who have their hobbies are clocks. And a lot of them come from engineering backgrounds. They've all kind of banded together and created that actual nonprofit and to be able to get the proper insurance and things like that, and then teamed up with this expert from Ohio. And that is the group that is charging forward. And if I'm not mistaken, they just received some funds from the Downtown Historic Group.
They did, from the residents of downtown Concord.
Yeah, and they are doing some other private fundraising to
Yes.
pay the expenses for
Yes.
this restoration?
The way that the agreement will read is the county will have no financial impact in terms of recreating that mechanism, getting it to work the way it originally was supposed to. So again, no electricity, and perhaps I should say that when the clock tower was renovated, there was motors added to move everything. That will all be taken out, and it'll work off a counterweight, meaning the way it was originally designed to operate. The only caveats that we've put in there is that the county will handle all of the lighting, installing the lighting up there. We will handle some of the framework that goes around where the actual Lexan inserts, or they look like they're glass from the outside, but where you see the dial, we will handle all that type of structural and boxing work. And then, of course, we will create the way to get up there safely. Part of the agreement we'll have with them is they will fabricate a Lexan or plastic box to go around the actual mechanism, and then they will also work with us to install a device to be able to silence the bell, so that when there's shows at the Historic Courthouse and the Davis Theater, that we can control that via our building automation system that we already have there. And we literally have the system that controls the HVAC in that building will actually tie into that to be able to control that bell, so that we can silence it during those events. Those are the two caveats in their agreement.
So I guess the obvious question is, when this is completed, who winds the clock?
Well, we've had some discussions about that, and I fully see us entering an agreement with the Cabarrus Time Savers where they probably are going to provide, to what we discussed at no cost, some sort of PM service where they're going up in there. And it will be some training to county staff also.
And those waits have to be, how frequently?
I believe that the first time they told me is every 7 days, but I believe they can find a way around that. And there's some other things we can do. It depends on their stance about an auto winder. Again, they're
Right.
trying to make it as original as they are. So some of those details are kind of still up for negotiation as they get deeper into this. That's a lot to swallow in terms of getting that out of there and refabricating it. So I'm giving them a certain amount of leeway to get to that point,
Right.
and then we can have those discussions. And that's probably something that we'll bring back to you in a progress report. The first step is getting it out of there, and the second step on the county's standpoint is making it safe to get back in there.
Well, it's a really neat project. You know, the historic courthouse is probably one of the most photographed and pictured areas in the county, and I think most people really don't tune into the clock piece of it. So when that is actually operating and the backlighting is working, I think people are really going to appreciate that.
And that's our aim. That's why we budgeted money in our operational account to take care of these things and provide that type of backlighting
Right.
in there. So pretty much the Cabarrus Time Savers would just be responsible for the actual mechanism that will turn it and make it ring, and the county will handle everything else.
I think some of the initiative in starting this action came from the same group that raised funds to restore the fountain there at the courthouse as well, which is beautiful.
The exact same group. I haven't had much dealings with them. They have a point person now that is the lead of the Cabarrus Time Savers. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he is engineer at Stewart Haas. I believe that's where he's employed.
Right.
He's a very passionate individual with a lot of knowledge on all of this. So I kind of take my cues from him on how we need to make that thing work. I just want to get that area safe.
Yeah, well, we certainly appreciate their efforts. and
Absolutely.
I think we're going to see a lot more to come. Any questions for Kyle on that item? If not, then we move to item 3.4 to the next, I guess, 2 generations of courthouse beyond the one we just talked about.
Yes, and I'll ask to bring up Judge McGee and Judge Hamby for this. Really, I just wanted the 2 judges to be here in case you guys have any questions. This was to give an update currently where we are on the process of the new courthouse in terms of the programming, the tours we've taken to other courthouses, our meeting with the state AOC, and then, of course, the construction manager at risk selection, which is an item later on in the agenda. So as you know, we have Silling Architects is under contract right now for the programming of the courthouse. So we've had several tours of different courthouses. We visited Durham, Wake, Union, Gaston, Mecklenburg, Orange, and Chatham. And big thanks to Judge McGee and Judge Hamby who set all of that up, and we had wonderful tour guides, folks that actually were involved with the design of it, truly not just the users of it, but the actual design of it. And in some cases, such as Wake, we were actually with the folks that maintain it every day. So from my standpoint, that was very interesting. We visited all these courthouses as a group. We took different entities with us. District attorneys were involved in some of the tours. We had folks from the clerk of courts for both tours. Of course, our architects, our ITS group was on one of the set of the tours. Judge Hanby and Judge McGee and myself were on all of them. And I think we got a lot of useful information of the do's, the don'ts, the fears. We heard a lot of things, and it was very good for the group to be in there with, at any given time, I'd say we had 4 to 6 folks from Silling Architects that were with us on these tours. So as we were looking at things from what was on the wall to what the TVs looked like to how big the vestibules were, they were jotting notes on each of ours likes and dislikes the whole time. And I'm sure they filled up several pages of notes on each of those courthouses. We also visited with the state AOC, and the purpose of that was to find out where the state is in terms of electronic file and record keeping in terms of the court system. that's a specific concern to us because obviously you're going to build a very large courthouse, and a lot of it, if you don't already know, is taken up by file rooms and vaults right now. And obviously, if we can get away from that, like, the county has initiated electronic files. I mean, that's how a lot of our departments are run, and you no longer see those large file rooms. So we wanted to have a very frank conversation with the AOC about where that is in terms of designing this new courthouse. And I'll let either of the judges jump in if you have any specific questions, but what I took away from it was that that system won't be in place by the time we build our courthouse, and that the best case scenario we can see is to take it into our account when we design it, that as we design these file rooms, we design them in spaces where, as we grow in the court system, meaning need more office space or assembly space or meeting space, we think about that those file rooms can be converted as the AOC rolls out this electronic filing system. And when I say electronic filing, that's probably a poor way to say it. It's from start to finish of a case, and do you want to kind of expand on that?
Well, I think that's correct. They're working, AOC, the Administrative Office of the Courts, is working on a process to allow folks to file electronically, and that all of the paperwork that's in existence now would be handled electronically. We don't know how far in the future that will be. I do think it'll be more than a couple years from now. But they are working on that. That's certainly a goal. They have also been very helpful in providing us with scanners for the material that we have now. Our clerk of court, Bill Baggs, has been very helpful and willing to allow his staff to do some proofreading of those items to allow them to accept more of scanning from us. We're also going to have someone from AOC come down and make sure that the papers that we're keeping, we are not keeping them for too long. I think there's some period of time after which you can get rid of some of the papers and store them electronically. They've been willing to come down and help us with that. So it's going to be a process. We can't say exactly how long it'll take, but obviously it is coming, and perhaps the best that we can do is design a building which takes that into account. So once you do not have to keep so many of these files, that space can be usable in the future.
And this was an item that County Manager Downs and myself had identified a while back that said we need to be talking to people and finding out where they are in this process or if they've even started, because obviously we don't have to build more square footage than we have to. And while I say that, we don't want to have to build these type of storage rooms. We've built a lot of them over there, and they're still all there, and if they weren't, we could probably move staff into them and expand. But we do need to take that into account as we design this building. The flow of a courthouse is much different than any other building the county has in terms of access of these files and how they need to get to courtrooms when they do, and who needs to be able to access them. Is it just the DAs? Is it just the clerk of courts? So there's a whole I guess, dance that goes on behind the scenes that does affect the users and therefore the efficiency of that staff, which again is to serve our citizens. So all of this is extremely crucial in how we design it. The only other thing that we did ask the AOC is that when they do roll out a pilot program to this, Judge McGee, myself, and Judge Hamby asked that we be the first one they try it on, so that we could be in front of it.
Yeah. I've also asked Kyle to talk, and I guess the judges as well, is that if there's some of this information that's in these files needs to be kept indefinitely, but you may not ever look at it for 10 years or so, is there an ability to store that off-site in a secure environment instead of in that prime real estate of that new courthouse?
I believe Kyle asked that question while we were here, and I don't know that there's any hard rules on that, but I think things that are not going to be accessed very often, I believe that AOC would not have an issue with storing it somewhere else.
And we did ask that question of the AOC, and there's other counties that are doing that. It would be about what do we consider secure? Do we have a place like that? And then obviously courthouse staff, which are not county employees, would need to have access to it. So we kind of have some logistics to work out on that in terms of the security. But I wanted to give you an update. That was one of the largest things, the most important thing, in my opinion, that we talked to the AOC about. Obviously, we talked to them about staffing, And I guess you could give an update on House Bill 717 so they understand where that is.
Well, we did, of course, ask for additional staffing, and it was included in the bill as it went through for us to get an additional Superior Court judge and an additional District Court judge, as well as 2 assistant district attorneys. But as the bill made its way through, those resources were stripped out. And we are certainly hopeful that the next time the legislature comes back that we'll get some additional help. By the numbers, we certainly do need additional personnel. We were very hopeful that this time through we would get additional folks. But it looks like that's going to be something that we're going to need to, again, push for the next time the legislature meets.
That kind of gives you an update of the tours and the AOC. As we move forward with the programming of the facility, we have to tackle some of the items that we've talked about, well, in my time, for 10 years now, but most recently, probably over the last 3 years, as this has really ramped up. And those are things like subgrade parking for judges and district attorneys, and what that does to the project and what that does to basically the aesthetic view of that facility when it's built. Things that we also need to discuss are all of our courtrooms jury able, or only some of them jury able? That affects your square footage and the amenities you have to provide, and also the passageways through there, whether it be elevators, corridors, things like that, all things that take up square footage, which, to just press this in your mind, that is a huge driver of this project right now, is square footage in terms of the footprint of what's over there and what can't go in the new building and then gets swapped over to the existing buildings and then increases our need and our cost of renovations. So those are a lot of the things that the group is discussing, and also the number of entrances. It's county staff belief that one entrance and one entrance only, meaning the public goes in an entrance and staff enters at that entrance also, but then is able to take a left turn when entering to go through another secure area, not having to go through the metal detectors with the folks that they might be prosecuting or defending or that day. And that is an extremely sensitive subject with the courthouse staff. And the 3 of us have talked about it probably 100 times, and we've heard different ideas from the group. As I left the last programming meeting, it was the courthouse's staff desire was to have 2 entrances. So public enters in the front entrance, and then I was not given any specific dimensions or distance it had to be, but another staff entrance. And what county staff, in terms of both the infrastructure and asset management department and the sheriff's department, has discussed is they all enter at the front entrance, but that staff can take an immediately left to be separated from everybody else, to go through an area where they would go through a kind of a secure vestibule so that nobody could piggyback behind them. But no metal detectors or anything like that. One of the reasons for that is we can share amenities in terms of imagine kind of a master control room in your public lobby where you have your sheriff's department sitting behind big glass, and there's all sorts of, display screens and cameras and everything. Not only are they able to look at the lobby, but they're able to look at this staff entrance that comes in to make sure that nobody piggybacks behind them or comes behind that person who has the badge to swipe in. They can look 2 ways. When we discussed with courthouse staff, if there was 2 entrances, they wanted the second entrance staffed, and they were talking about having it at a different location. That means that I'm having to build 2 of those secure rooms where you have camera views and you can see things, and you have bullet-resistant glass and things like that. So what I'm asking for, and what I'll bring back to the courthouse group is this type of design where you're sharing getting in the front door, but then you make an immediate left-hand turn. And I will gladly allow the judges to speak on any of this. They heard all the conversation. They were in the same room as me.
Well, thank you, Kyle. I would say that the best practice would be to design it so that any door which is regularly used should have security. I understand there's a safety component to that, and there's also a financial component to that in making that decision. I think that the DA's office would like at least a second door to allow their folks to enter that way. And I would imagine some of the attorneys would feel the same way. I understand this is a building that'll have parking underneath, so that would be another entrance for those that would have parking underneath, or at least that's what I anticipate that we would have. I don't have a strong position one way or the other, except the belief that any access door should have some security. And what I can do is invite the DAs and the attorneys or anyone else over there that feels that they have a view of that they'd like to express to send you all emails before you all make that decision.
The DAs did ask if they should be at this meeting, and I let them know that it wasn't a public comment, and I asked them to put their requests in a letter, and that I would have Silling Architect try to render what it is county staff is offering, which I would call it our compromise. It's an entrance, it's a second entrance within the main entrance, quite frankly. And for me, it minimizes the amount of cameras and guards we have to put into that place, and kind of gets the most bang for our buck. But they did request to be here, and I told them that we weren't far enough in the design to show you anything where them arguing or pleading in one way and me saying another way without looking at some renderings of it or some ideas would probably not prove useful this early in the project. But they did ask to speak with you all. I told them to put it in a letter, and that there would be in a more appropriate time for them to come back and speak with you.
And I don't know if Judge Hamby would like to express a view on that.
I think those views have been covered. I agree that if there is a full second entrance, that does need to be staffed also. And we've seen it both ways in the various courthouses, where people come in all one entrance, but then are divided from that point. So I'd be interested to see how Silling deals with that, but that may be a way to approach it. We also know that the DA's office is concerned about violence against district attorneys and their families that have taken place all over the country. So they have a particular concern. There have been some attacks on judges as well, but I think actually the assistant district attorneys and defense attorneys are probably subject to more attacks than the judges themselves are. So I think that's something you'll have to consider and think about, and perhaps Silling can come up with a way that most effectively and most efficiently deals with those issues.
And I would say in addition to that, I think also private attorneys, particularly that deal with family law cases, safety is always a concern. Folks that work for Department of Social Services and deal with termination of parental rights, and the lawyers for the Department of Social Services. We deal with some very difficult issues, and people have strong emotional reaction to the work that we do. And so it is a tough call where to draw the line and what can be, what's the safest way to do this.
And again, when it comes to the subgrade parking, keep in mind the spaces are going to be limited if we do end up going that route. So I don't anticipate us being able to put the entire DAs, meaning all the assistant DAs, under there. And even if we could at this time, that staff is going to grow. And our parking deck underneath the building, if we have one, is not going to grow. So this is an issue that we have to discuss now. And quite frankly, the design hinges on it, because entrances and this type of stuff is not just money for staffing them, it's square footage and how you lay out the building in terms of once you get in an entrance, you have to get to a secure elevator somewhere, because we're obviously not going to put an assistant DA or a judge on an elevator with the public. So this has a domino effect that is vital to starting the design. And the time has started ticking in terms of we have to have the design in a certain amount of time, because we have to have a guaranteed maximum price from a construction manager at risk so that we can go out for debt. So we've kind of talked about these discussions for years, and now it'll be time when we start bringing these issues in front of you with renderings and making some tough decisions.
As you can tell from the discussion, this is going to be just like opening up the sheriff's admin and detention center over there. Not only is it a large building, it's going to take more staff. both from a maintenance and cleaning, all the way up to security as well. So, yeah, just be thinking of that as we move along, so.
Kyle, are we going to still be sticking with the city's height restriction?
85. That's
85
currently the height
That's what it
restriction in
is
the city
now,
of
and
Concord.
that's what it is now. So we're
Correct.
Are we thinking maybe that we're going to ask for something more?
I've not come to that conclusion if we're going to have to do that yet,
I
sir.
didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I know that's the question people are asking.
Yeah, I don't think we're the only ones asking that question. I think as you see Concord grow, there's going to be other people asking those questions. So I think we're probably going to have that discussion, but I don't know that it's a pressing need right now. We are meeting, County Manager Downs and Deputy County Manager Marshall and myself are meeting with the city to discuss things like Means Avenue and some of the height restrictions, but it's just a preliminary discussion. Obviously, a lot of the area is going to be affected by this construction. So we kind of need to have a discussion about what's going to happen to downtown when we do this.
Okay, other questions? Is nobody going to ask about the cell phone ban? And was July the 1st the date? So you've had
June
one
1st.
day,
No,
Oh,
June
No,
1st.
1 month.
June 1st, so you've had 1 month, yeah.
Yes.
Well, I would first like to thank everyone for working with us to put that in place. I particularly would like to thank Ms. Thompson and Mr. Bill for their assistance. We got the information out to the public, and I think it has gone pretty well thus far. And we have, the lockers that we have, I think, is helpful to the public. We have not run out of lockers, as best I can tell. Lots of folks are choosing to take the phones back to their cars. And so it has really worked well thus far. And I
Good.
appreciate everyone's help. And it took about 6 months or so for us to get that all worked out. But I think taking it slowly has made it go much better than it would have gone otherwise.
And as for the daily distractions in criminal and other large court settings, I have had absolutely no such distractions in criminal court during the month of June. So
Good.
that has made it much easier to stay on task and to attend to our work without distraction.
Great.
From an operational standpoint, Lieutenant Allred told me that they have 11 cell phones that still have not been, nobody's ever come back for them.
Really?
So the safe is filled with 11 of them. He says we probably only utilize half of the lockers we have on a daily basis. And that, I know we've definitely, I know Kasha has gotten some Facebook comments on it, and we've tried to work through several of those. And we also had a visit from the city who didn't like the amount of signs that I put on the sidewalk, letting people know about this. So it was a little bit of a slap on the wrist in that. But it got the word out, and we've removed the signs since.
I'm surprised that there are 11 that haven't been claimed, really.
And we have compared that with the people who have gone into the building and gone out in the other direction, you might say. So we've tried to make sure anybody who's incarcerated from jail or from court, that those phones are accounted for.
Right.
And so that's 11 that aren't included in that list.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we actually had one who was incarcerated in Mecklenburg, and after he got out, came back for the phone.
Really?
Yeah, really did. So, kinda
Well, I'm
nice.
glad to hear it's going well. Appreciate that update.
Thank you.
Okay, we move now to item 3.5, which is a video update from the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for this week's Video of the Week. Last week, the North Carolina City and County Managers Association held its summer seminar in Carteret County, and here are some of the highlights from the gathering. County and city managers from across North Carolina were in Atlantic Beach late last week for the summer seminar held each year. The event was an educational opportunity for managers for which the NCACC provided support. One highlight for many in attendance was a Friday morning session including former managers along with spouses speaking to attendees on the impact the profession has on both the manager and family members. Tom Lundy, retired Catawba County manager, was one of the speakers at that session. There was a popular session on strategic plan implementation, and the NCACC held its yearly session where staff gave county managers an update on legislative goals, among other topics. A session featuring Speaker Keith Allred told of an organization he has started called Common Sense American, which strives to help citizens understand specific issues and helps them to communicate with their elected officials to encourage participation in the democratic process. The North Carolina City and County Managers Association officers were also sworn in. Chatham County Manager Renee Pascal became the association's first vice president, and Grant Goings, City Manager of Wilson, became the president. Well, that's all we have for this week. Presentations from the event are on our website at the link provided below. If you have any questions about anything we've discussed here, please email communications@ncacc.org. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you. All right, we move now to discussion items for action at our July 17th meeting. First up is designation of voting delegate for the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners 11th Annual Conference.
I can do it. As you know, every year there is a need for a voting delegate. This year, Chairman Morris and Commissioner Tiger will be attending the conference. So we need to designate one of the two of them as a voting member while they are in attendance.
This is actually the North Carolina.
Oh, I'm sorry, this is.
Yeah. So there may be a larger group of us attending that meeting.
Sorry, I was thinking national. Sorry
Yeah.
about that.
I think we already did the
I
other
believe
one.
Chairman Morris is our
Oh,
voting
okay, I was
delegate
getting
at the
confused on the two.
national.
I was thinking we have done the county one now. So, okay, so this is for the NCACC. And
So do we need to handle that at our regular meeting on July 17th? Which is on a Tuesday.
Correct.
Instead of a Monday, I believe. That's correct, yes. Okay. Then we move to item 4.2, resolution amending the Board of Commissioners 2018 meeting schedule. And I think you have that information before you. Board members have reviewed their schedules, and July 18th, 2018 was the date selected to hold the Cabarrus Summit, second quarterly meeting at the Cabarrus Arena and Event Center in Concord. And so we do need to suspend our rules to approve the resolution, include adding that meeting to our schedule. So I would entertain a motion to suspend the rules. Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. And then the resolution states, whereas on December 18th, 2017, the Cabarrus County Board of Commissioners adopted a meeting schedule for the calendar year 2018, which sets forth the dates, times, and locations of various official county meetings. Whereas the board desires to hold a summit at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, July 18th, 2018 at the Cabarrus Arena and Event Center in Concord, North Carolina. Now therefore be it resolved that the Cabarrus County Board of Commissioners hereby amends its 2018 meeting schedule as follows. The Board of Commissioners will hold the Cabarrus Summit 2018 second quarterly meeting at 6 p.m. on July 18th, 2018 at the Cabarrus Arena and Event Center in Concord, North Carolina. And so do I hear a motion that we approve the resolution as presented? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes. Thank you.
Chairman Morris,
Yes, ma'am.
on 4.1, that's under the consent agenda for the next meeting.
Okay.
We didn't decide.
We
If it's
do
on the
need
consent
to
agenda.
include a name on the consent agenda. Is that your?
That's
is
my
that
way of
you
making a motion for
volunteering?
you. I don't know who else is going.
I do plan to attend. I think it's in Catawba County
Right,
this
yes.
year. Yeah. So if you would like for me to do that, I'm more than happy to.
Anybody else want to jump on? All right, so moved,
Commissioner Hughes going,
and I'm going.
yeah, so. Okay.
So I'll make a motion
I'll second the motion. The motion
for
was
Steve
Chairman
and
Morris?
Chairman Morris. Mhm.
I'll second
And let's see, do we need to suspend the rules? No. Okay.
Okay.
It goes on consent. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion passes. Okay, now we move to item 4.3, approval of project ordinances and budget amendment related to the CIP funded projects in the fiscal year 19 general fund budget. And we are happy to have Pam Dubois explain all those complicated items to us.
Okay, as part of the annual budget process, you adopt your budget, and the CIP items that were included in that budget process. We're bringing before you today just the Cabarrus County projects. The Cabarrus County Schools and Kannapolis City Schools projects will be brought to you next month. So as we stand right now, there was $5,946,000 worth of projects that were presented in the budget. And this part of the approval process is to move the money from the capital reserve fund over to the projects so that the projects could begin. One project is the courthouse expansion for $5 million to continue the architectural design. Another project was the governmental center chiller replacement at $211,000. The third one is a radio network and Ethernet backhaul and edge project at $500,000, and then the arena lighting control system replacement for $235,000. So this will allow these projects to begin, and then in August, we will bring before you the school projects and any other changes that might be made to the list for projects that were adopted as part of the June budget. So we were just waiting some more data from the schools before we came before you with those. So this would take care of the first phase of it and allow these projects to continue forward.
Okay, questions for Pam?
Just to jog my memory, the lighting at the arena, that was the life safety lighting, is that right? Is that,
Mr. Billiver's coming.
thanks. I want to make sure I'm remembering that correctly.
Aisle lighting was already completed. This is actually to take out the panel that controls the lighting for the whole facility. That's the watt stopper back from the day it was built, and we can only get things on Amazon parts for it, and it's failing right now. We've got people that are controlling the lights via the breakers. Yes, sir.
Okay, any other questions? All righty, thank you. And we move to item 4.4, update to reserve policy for the county. Pam, again.
Okay. We have quite a few policies with the county, and Susan Farrington and I went to a conference and had conversations with all three of the rating agencies, and also attended one of the sessions on fund balance reserves for different counties. And in conversations with the rating agencies on page, well, it says 39, if you'll flip to that, Angela, please. We have a few changes that we made to the policy, and Ms. Farrington made several of those changes, like from expenses to expenditures, and added uncommitted fund balance and workers' compensation liability and the dental into our current plan. So those are some of the adjustments that have occurred over the time period in which changes have happened and how we have to report our finances. What we added to this policy is we never talked about the what if the policy falls below 15%. It's never happened, but what is the what if? And that was one of the things that we picked up from the conference and some of the information that came out from the rating agencies. So we're requesting to add to the language, if the assigned unassigned fund balance at the end of the current fiscal year is less than the approved fund balance level, the deficiency should be replenished in the coming fiscal years, not to exceed a total of 3 consecutive years. And what we're saying here is some policies that we saw, they said that if you fell below, you would fix it before the end of that next fiscal year. Well, when you fall below, you don't know you fell below until after the budget's adopted, so you can't fix it in 1 year. And so most likely it would take at least 2 years to get it fixed, and 3 years seemed relatively reasonable. Some went as far as 5 years. Like I said, we don't have any indication that we would ever fall below that, but in order for our policies to be solid and for our rating agencies to understand that we recognize that this could happen and we have a plan in place, we did not want to be, for lack of a better term, dinged during an evaluation of our debt. So we worked with the 3 rating agencies while we were at the conference, and this was suitable language for them to be put into our policy. And just to let you know, any policies that do come in front of this board, Finance and Ms. Farrington will have reviewed any of those policies if they do have my name on them. So I just want you to know that she is well aware of the changes that are being made here. That's why her name is on the agenda item, so you will know that I've gotten the blessings of the Finance Department prior to bringing these to you. But we feel like this will be suited language to take us forward unless something else changes in our environment with the funds that we actually have. And this will meet all of our needs to keep us in line and keep us with the rating agencies in their good graces.
Very good. Pretty straightforward. Any questions?
Just one, Pam, in that event that there would be a shortfall of the 15%, would that require like a budget amendment or a budget line item for the next year to compensate for that shortage? How do you do that?
If we were to actually fall below, we would have to, well, let's see, how will we budget that?
Say you fall, $500,000 short of the 15%, and you've got up to, the way I understand it, you got up to 3 years to make that up. Would you proportionately that out every year? Because if you do it like that, it could compound if you should have 2 years in a row or even 3 years in a row.
In a situation, if it were a $500,000 shortfall, I would probably budget a what would I call it? Some kind of a board expense, knowing we weren't going to spend that money. So the budget would be balanced, and I can't think of the term that I'm trying to, it's like at the tip of my tongue, but just an expenditure setting aside that amount of money, knowing we wouldn't spend it so that at the end of the year it would fall into fund balance and regenerate that $500,000. Board-directed expenses is what I'm trying to think of.
Right. Would that need to be part of this change?
That would occur, so if it came upon this, and let's just say this is June 30th, 2018, and we get our audit completed in September, and we're $500,000 shortfall, we'll need to wait until budget 2020 to budget that $500,000 shortfall.
Okay.
If you were going to do it that way, or if, depending on how the year ended the next year, we might not, we would have to go ahead and budget it because we would not know until 3 months into the fiscal year. So you would have to kind of budget something very similar we do with a landfill for closure and post-closure costs. We budget for those costs, even though we're not going to expend them until 30 years into the future.
Right. Okay.
And I think it was very similar to that type of a line item, but you would just designate an amount of money knowing that that was going to be your shortfall. So let's just say if it was $1.5 million, then you might want to do $750 and $750 over the next 2 years to break it down. But we are very conscientious with the revenues, very conservative with our revenue estimates and the expenditures that we have. And the likelihood of it happening is really slim to none. I mean, we've had a surplus, I think, every year since we've implemented this policy. I think we had 1 year that we didn't have a surplus during the 5-year time period in which you suspended transferring the excess funds over, and it was very minimal. So I don't think that would be a big issue, but I think we've been very conservative in that, and I think you'll see that coming in the next budget year. But by doing that, it's just that this came upon us because we didn't have the what-if scenario, and we wanted to have the what-if scenario. So if you were to look at our audit, you will see, and Ms. Farrington would be able to tell you that if she were here. We have the 15% set aside, but then there are other committed fund balance amounts of money for any litigation that we hear about from the attorney. So what if we lose the suit? APFO, we set that money aside, so it didn't hurt us when we had to pay it out. What if we needed to pay out an incentive? So we're a little above and beyond on conservative, so we have anything that we know about, there is a committed fund balance for. So we're prepared for the what if.
Over and above the 15%.
Over and above the 15%. So we're very diligent to be very protective, to not be in this situation, but because we didn't define how to handle it, you know, we're saying that we'll get it back in there within 3 years, and then we'll have to approach the board if it actually happens.
Well, I tend to agree with you. I don't think we're going to see that happen, but the purpose of this is in the event that it does. But I do think one thing that we will see in the future is a smaller amount of surplus at the end of the year, primarily because of the way that you guys are doing the budget now, rather than, you know, I mean, you made some changes this year that, you know, that were much more conservative into, like for employees, for example, you know, you lose and you gain. And I think in years past, there might have been budget for full staff for every department and everything when you always have vacancies. And so those monies now, and then another example would be like the library expense for this year. For Midland, you're only budgeting like 75% because it's not going to open until October, November. And so you're bringing the budget down more by not having it in for the whole year. And so I hope I didn't confuse you, but I think you know what I'm talking about. Because the Midland, just for an example, the year starts on July 1st, but they may not open until October, November. So you just don't budget 100% of the money. You budget what they're going to need from October through it. And so I think we've got several areas like that. It's going to make our surplus at the end of the year much smaller, or we're closing that gap to making it a closer budget to not having a lot of surplus.
And
But-
one other factor that's going into that, Mr. Thrift's department and down the tax collector's office, their collection rate is getting higher and higher every year. And you use that collection rate when you budget the next year. And as it's growing, you're always going to have surplus revenue. So the only thing that's going to cause a lot of surplus revenues in the property tax area is going to be discoveries. So we're going to lose the excess money that we had from the increase in the property tax rate, or collection rate, excuse me. We'll lose that increase, but so that is narrowing down, and sales tax is kind of leveling off, so it's narrowing down. And you are correct. We're trying to do as much of that as we possibly can to get it and more in line, but the whole purpose behind this policy was that anything above 15%, we were not trying to build excess savings. We converted that positive reflection in our audit to turn it into cash instead of debt financing. So we're trying to do the most positive we can with whatever situation that occurs, because there's no, I mean, 5% within your budget is reasonable, but 5% in a budget our size is several $1 million. So you got to take the best of what you can with all the circumstances and make the most positive out of it. And every time we pay cash for something and don't borrow money for it, that's a substantial savings.
And I totally agree, and those are usable funds, otherwise would not be usable until the next year. And so that just makes the money that we do have go further. I appreciate all the effort on that.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, we'll move to 4.5 from EMS, authorization to purchase ambulances. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Good evening. We come before you tonight for approval to proceed with the purchase of the 3 ambulances that were budgeted. With the recent roles and progression of things at EMS, Captain Jonathan Malden is taking over the responsibilities of acquiring these bids, and so he will be presenting this project tonight.
Thank you. Good evening. As you may know, and most of you have been here for a few years and know the process, it's time to request the PO for these ambulances. This year we did budget for 3 Demir's ambulances. They will be on a Chevrolet chassis. That total was $497,475 for the three. That breaks down to, let me get to it here, $165,825 per ambulance. That's tax, tag, graphics, and out the door. So that handles everything. These, as you may recall, in 2015, then Major Lentz, now Director Lentz, had the forethought to go ahead and get ahead of the safety standards that were coming down the line from NCOEMS. Those actually took effect about 24 hours ago. They went into effect yesterday, and I'm happy to say that we've been ahead of those safety standards for the last 3 years. Again, this year we'll be going with Demir's ambulances, who are compliant and exceed the majority of those standards set forth. That is through the CAS safety standards. They address things such as securing patients, securing equipment within the cab, obviously crash testing and things of that nature. So again, we're happy to be going with Demir's again this year. We've done a few things over the years to improve the safety on our standpoint. We've brought things closer to the operator, so the operator doesn't have to get out of the chair. They can stay belted in while they're taking care of the patients. We're hoping to add this year, we're adding some ground lighting to help prevent some missteps as they're exiting the vehicle during the night. As you know, most of these ambulances will pull up in a driveway or a front yard that may have holes in the driveway and roots. We're not always operating on solid surfaces, so we want to give our employees the best opportunity to stay healthy in that aspect. Again, this year we'll be purchasing through First Priority South, same service we used last year, and we'll be piggybacking on the SAVIC buyers group, which ensures that we get the best price for the product that we're purchasing without having to put it out for formal bid. We are replacing units 945, 952, and 951. That's a 2013 ambulance and two 2014 ambulances. The highest mileage being 146,732 and the lowest being 119,000. In 2009, I believe it was, we adopted a fleet standard to surplus our vehicles, bring them off of the front line at 100,000 miles, and then try to surplus them at 125,000. So these three ambulances are reserve units, meaning if one of the frontline units needed a PM or had a repair that needed to be done, the crews could get in these trucks and be serviceable to the county while their frontline unit's getting repaired. So these three will be surplus this year, much like we surplus the ones last year. I believe I've hit just about everything. Am I missing anything?
Yeah, the discrepancy in the price is my fault, and what it is the 158,825 that is documented there is the actual purchase price of the ambulances. The figure he has included includes tax, title, and tag, and we do our graphics locally just because there's a considerable savings to do it locally versus doing it at the ambulance manufacturer. So the price he quoted includes all that, and the price I entered on my budget agenda was the actual purchase price of the ambulance. That's the discrepancy there, and I apologize for that confusion.
Okay, questions? I know we've had discussions before. You talked about the safety standards, and Jimmy had shown me in the past the restraint system, old versus new, and so are we? Have we now replaced all of those old style?
Not quite. This will put us in a position that our frontline units now will be meeting standards, and our reserves will still be of the previous standards. So we're getting there. This puts us in a really good position.
Yeah, good. I studied these specs more than normal because, and I'm thinking, how do you decide? There are so many options and so many
It's a very detailed
decisions
process
to make. Yeah, I'm sure that involves quite a bit of time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's we're fortunate to have a supplier that's very familiar with obviously his product, but, and all the different options within the product. But at that point, we take into account what would benefit us the most. And obviously, financially, we have to be fiscally responsible with what we're purchasing and making sure that we're not just buying bells and whistles, but we're buying solid equipment that's going to be of true benefit and not just for show or a frivolous comfort.
Yeah, I guess I looked at the difference between 3 oxygen outlets and 4 oxygen outlets, and my thought was, seems like whatever would work for one would be good for everybody, but.
Everybody's needs are a little bit different.
Yeah.
Right. There's some transport services that are transporting 2 or 3 patients at one time.
Sure.
And, you know, for us, it may not be that we transport 1 at a time. So 1 and possibly a backup would be of service there. It's things like that we've learned over the years. And Director Lentz is very familiar with it, and he and those before me have done a very good job at coming up with what works for us here in the county with our protocols and our policies.
I'm glad y'all are on top of that, because this is one of those vehicles that I hope to never ride in.
And hopefully it contributes to our 95% approval rating with the survey we reviewed earlier.
Yeah, well, that's excellent. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we move now to item 4.6, Finance, Juvenile Crime Prevention Council, allocation of funds, and we're happy to have Suzanne Burgess to talk with us about that.
Hi, good evening. How are you? This item is for the JCPC funding. We received this funding, which is the Juvenile Crime Prevention funding. And the county receives this funding every year, and we have sub-recipients. Then we turn it over to other agencies. So it's a little bit different this year, because in the past, we've always budgeted the money, but it had to go through your approval process, the funding plan. Last year, you gave that authority, you delegated it to Susan to sign off on the funding plan, and therefore, they're going to get their money sooner. So the money's budgeted in 19, but it's unallocated, and you have a budget amendment where we're moving it from unallocated to those subrecipients.
Okay, questions? I do serve on that Juvenile Crime Prevention Council, and this is all pass-through.
Yes, sir.
Money that comes, but they go through a great deal of scrutiny and interviews and quite a process to determine how that money is spent. And Ms. Farrington does serve on that board as well and keeps very close tabs on it. Okay, thank you. And while you're at the table and rejoined by Jimmy Lentz, resolution approving lease financing of emergency management services, power stretchers.
So you probably all know by now that Jimmy wants some stretchers. And this is the next step in the debt process. Susan has submitted, the approval, of the resolution. She has submitted the application to the LGC. It will be on their August agenda for approval. This resolution needs to be approved by the board to enter into the financing.
We come before you in March or April for approval to proceed with this with some funds that were available in last year FY18's actual budget. After that was done, we realized through Susan and the Finance Department that a lease of this magnitude had to have LGC approval. And getting the bond attorneys involved there, Furno had not done a lease of this magnitude with the state of North Carolina and was unfamiliar with their requirements, so it's taken us some time to work through those. The numbers have not changed from what was previously approved. It's just been a little bit of a process to work through the verbiage of the contracts and that kind of thing, and so we're back now ready to proceed. All that has been met. We're ready to go to the LGC in August.
But we still don't have any of the power stretchers.
We do not. No. I would guess with the approval of the LGC in August that we would be in October, because it'll take us 30 to 60 days from we get final approval to actually have them on site. So we're looking at the fall now to get that implemented.
Right.
And we did budget the lease payment, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is budgeted.
Okay, any questions? All right, thank you. Okay, next item from Infrastructure and Asset Management, Cabarrus County Courthouse Construction Manager at Risk Selection. And we're happy to have Mr. Billefer back to the table.
Good evening. Cabarrus County posted a request for qualifications for the Construction Manager at Risk Services on March 21st, 2018 for the construction of the new Cabarrus County Courthouse and renovations of the existing courthouse. 5 firms submitted qualification package by the due date of April 23rd, 2018. An internal selection committee consisting of Cabarrus County staff, Cabarrus County Sheriff's Department staff, and Cabarrus County commissioners made a short list of 3 of the 5 firms. Selling Architects offered written evaluations of the RFQ submissions and were involved in the process but did not have an official vote in the process. The 3 shortlisted construction firms made their presentations to the selection committee and Selling Architects on June 13, 2018. The presentations were 45 minutes long, with 30 additional minutes given for questions and answers. The selection committee then met again on June 21st, 2018 for a deliberation meeting to make the selection to present to the Cabarrus County Board of Commissioners. And this is that presentation of that construction manager at risk firm's name. The action I'm requesting is the motion to approve the bid award and authorize the county manager to execute the contract between Cabarrus County and Messer Construction and Lyles Construction, subject to revision by the county attorney. That is the firm or the pairing of the firms that the selection committee voted to award this project to was Messer Construction and Lyles Construction.
Just an update, Messer is actually the one building the parking deck, and Lyles Construction is a local contractor here in Concord that have teamed up together to do this project.
Are they working as a team on the parking deck as well, or?
They are not, to my knowledge. I have not seen Lyles on any of their list of subcontractors. However, according to what we heard in the presentation, they're working on several projects in Charlotte together, but nothing of this scope, or we would know about it if it was of this scope.
Okay, questions for Mr. Billefer? I think Commissioner Kiger and Shu both served on that committee. Did y'all have anything you wanted to add? Good process?
The process was very transparent. All of the firms made good presentations. We had good discussion among the committee, and I think we've made an excellent choice. They chose to pair up to bring that to the table. That wasn't something, that just to clarify, we didn't ask them to pair up and give and award it in that form. They got together to make the presentation, and so we developed, Mr. Billefer has developed a great relationship with those gentlemen and their staff. I think it was evident that they were quite excited to be there to make the presentation, as all the firms were, but at the end, they stood out, and I think we've made an excellent choice.
The county did not request that any of the firms pair up with anybody local, just as we did not do with the architect firms that decided to do so. Mind you, we chose an architect that did not pair up with anybody. So that wasn't anything that the county requested or said would be a good idea in any way.
It is always pleasing when we can do business with Cabarrus County firms and provide jobs to Cabarrus County residents.
All of the 5 firms that submitted are excellent firms in terms of construction. The other two that were shortlisted that were not chosen by the selection committee made great presentations, and I have no doubt that any of the folks that we looked at could build this building. But the presentation that we heard from the Messer and Lyles team had a lot of bearing on the selection committee, an extreme amount of bearing.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Thank you, sir. Okay, we move now to item 4.9, Planning and Development, Harrisburg Area Land Use Plan Update from Susie Morris.
Good evening. I'm pleased to present to you this evening the update to the Harrisburg Land Use Plan. As you all know, we have partnered with the town of Harrisburg for several years on long-range planning and planning for the Harrisburg area. That area does include more than just the town of Harrisburg. It's Harrisburg's city limits, the ETJ, and then also the unincorporated area. The last time that we updated that plan was in 2010, so we partnered again in 2017 to review and update the plan based on existing conditions and also to better reflect market conditions, because the last time that we did the plan, that was during the Great Recession. The final draft was presented at a joint meeting to the County Planning and Zoning Commission and the Town of Harrisburg's Commission. That plan was adopted by the Town of Harrisburg. As part of this process, we did have a lot of public input. We had over 180 in-person contacts and over 450 responses to 2 different surveys that were put out. So a lot of community input. So it is now ready to be presented to the Board of Commissioners for consideration. And I have a brief slideshow to go through with you all, just to present some of the highlights of the process, as well as some of the findings for you all to see. Some of you were very involved in the process, and we appreciate that involvement. And for those of you who were at the summit, you know, we did talk about this a little bit, so this will kind of bring you forward from that point. So we did start the process in August, so it's been about a year. As part of this process, we set up an advisory committee. That advisory committee consisted of 3 of our Planning and Zoning Commissioner members from Cabarrus County and 3 Planning and Zoning folks from the town of Harrisburg. And then in addition to that, we had staff members that were part of that committee and also the consultant team. The advisory committee really played a big role in this process. Because there were so many comments coming in from the community, we really had to dig deep into that to find out, you know, how do these comments that we're getting now, how do those turn into action items, and how do we process these so moving forward to make sure that we have the right ideas about what people are saying should happen. So again, we had 3 different community meetings. We had 2 surveys, and then we also started the process with stakeholder interviews, which were utility providers, transportation folks, and then also real estate and developers that are local to the area to get their take on, you know, in this area, how do you see it growing over the next 20 years? So this is familiar to you because this is probably the same slide, or maybe it has a few more items on it, but the goals and objectives from that 2010 plan really did not change. So still to maintain open space, maintain the existing neighborhoods, expand recreational opportunities, which you also heard earlier in the survey, improve circulation and supply transportation options, which you also heard about in the survey, and the growth planning, promote high-quality development, encourage a mixture of land uses and housing opportunities, foster economic development, support existing agriculture, and then ensure that the scale of growth fits the small-town character of Harrisburg. So kind of updating those goals from 2010 and then moving forward, how does this happen now? This is the proposed land use map. As part of your information, there was also a copy of the current land use plan map in there. It's a little confusing because there were some color changes, but you can see that once again, based on densities, we're trying to drive the development back to where the utilities and infrastructure exist. As part of this, if you remember, last year we looked at the Moorhead Road, the Moorhead West area in a lot of detail. That was just carried forward into this plan. So we didn't spend a lot of time on that, but you will see that there are some differences here where we have developed some nodes where mixed-use development could take place, and also some nodes where maybe some neighborhood services would take place. Before, you would see an actual mixed-use district assigned to properties. So that would have been the town center, that would have been down around the Brookdale Village area. So really kind of honing in and taking that all one step further, since a lot of Harrisburg is already developed. The green area that you see is a conservation type area. So for those of you who were here when we adopted the last plan, you'll remember that we did an interlocal agreement to try to limit utility extensions in that area. As part of the plan this time, we did not do that, but we shifted the densities so that, again, the densities would be back and the development hopefully is back where the investment is. So we had 4 primary focus areas. The first one, again, is the Moorhead West area. But as part of that, and these 4 areas, we looked at those in a little more in depth to see how they could be developed. So for the first one, the Caldwell Road extension, when you're coming into Harrisburg on 49, there really is no sense of arrival. There's the nice new sign that says "Welcome to Harrisburg," but past that, there's not really anything that says, "Hey, I'm in the town of Harrisburg." So this is the area where the new Harris Teeter Shopping Center is. This would be on the opposite side of 49. And again, thinking about how can that Caldwell Road extension happen? It's going to have to be a public-private partnership because it's millions of dollars. Like we talked about with the Moorhead plan, utilities, there are no utilities. That's why there is no development there, because it's going to be a lot of money. So just trying to figure out how could that intersection develop to where it would create a sense of place. The next area that we looked at, Area 2, was the Blackwater Road area. If you're familiar with 49, you know that at Blackwater there were some changes that resulted because of the double tracking project, and then also a new configuration to how you exit 49. That has impacted that area. So looking at that, how could that character be maintained and yet allowing some maybe mixed use out towards 49? But how do you maintain the rural character? Because when you drive down Blackwater right now, there are a lot of farms and farms that are in the voluntary ag program. So using different design type options to push the development back from the road to maintain some of that character while still allowing some development to happen out near 49. The third area that we looked at was the Shamrock Road area. Again, this area was impacted by the double tracking project. If you know where Saddle Creek is, if you drive to the Saddle Creek facility, you can no longer cross Shamrock. There's a gate there. So knowing that that gate is there and that you can't have that through movement, what happens? So when we looked at this, we looked at one area as maybe developing as the light industrial type uses that are still there. And then across the other side of the gate, looking at that to tie back into maybe Farm Mill Road. This is what was affectionately termed during the process as Harrisburg East, to where, it could be a mixed use. By mixed use, I mean different type of housing product, where maybe it was a 55 and older community. There is right about here, I don't know if you can see my pointer, there's an old historic house here. It's a beautiful house. It could be restored, and the family really would like to keep that there. So similar to some projects that have happened in Chapel Hill, where that was the focus, and then, smaller lots for either millennial type product or 55 and over, expanding south to single family homes, also making connections to Farm Mill Park, and then also making a north-south connection from Stallings. And then the last place that we looked at to kind of get into some detail to see, okay, how could this maybe develop, was Hickory Ridge Road. So what you see in the middle is the new elementary site. What you see to the east of Hickory Ridge is the Bloom project. So showing a continuation of the Bloom project on the east side, but on the west side, again, that smaller product type. If any of you have been up off of 73 lately, you might be familiar with the Trilogy project. So similar to that, where you have a school, you have smaller lots where maybe it's 55 and over, which kind of creates volunteer opportunities for the school. There's a base, and then also maybe incorporating some green space or a park, but just kind of showing how that area could develop based on the densities that are in the plan, and also that versification of different product types. So out of this, there are some key recommendations that kind of relate back to those goals and objectives that we talked about. So the first one, we heard a lot about why can't we get, the town center finished? And there is a lot of support for the town or government to step in to help facilitate the completion of that project. It's my understanding from the budget meeting and when they adopted the land use plan at the town of Harrisburg that Novant has asked the town to find a different facility for their Rock in the Berg concerts, which were held right in front. So hopefully we will see some activity on that site, and Novant will start to develop it so that you will have maybe more of that focal point. So a lot of, again, a lot of support from residents in the area for town center to be completed and to create that sense of place so that they have a downtown, especially with the Publix development happening across the street. The second one is to create value in key areas to attract investment. So for example, if the focus is on the Caldwell Road extension, then what happens to 49? Because everybody says we really need to do something with 49. So how does that work? But creating those mixed-use nodes, employment centers, also, again, for the different generations that want to be close to walkable neighborhoods where they can walk to the doctor's office or walk to the store. So out of this, where does that happen? Getting that mixed-use sense of place. Brookdale is already there. Farmington is coming. Is there anywhere else that can happen? And, does the town, does the county, where can we help with the economic development projects? The next one is to protect current employment in industrial locations. So there's kind of a mismatch in Harrisburg. They have industrial properties, but those industrial properties are not necessarily being used for industrial uses. So trying to protect those light industrial properties to get the jobs. The other mismatch that we heard a lot about was that the people who work in Harrisburg, the type of jobs that they have, don't necessarily match up with the jobs in Harrisburg. So how can, from an economic development standpoint and an employment standpoint, how can there be a matchup so that people can live and work in Harrisburg and not have to commute? Again, another one is to expand the housing choices. People are downsizing. People don't want to have to take care of a yard. Millennials like the turnkey and go type of development. So how can that be diversified? Is it that it happens in, these commercial nodes, or does that happen, in a development where it's just multi-generation? It was very interesting to see all of the comments, because one of them was, do you want to be in a residential enclave? So, right now, if you look at the composition of Harrisburg, there are a lot of neighborhoods, but you really can't walk anywhere from those neighborhoods. You have to get in the car and you have to drive. So can we create neighborhoods where people can walk, exercise, and also get to some retail services? In that green area, the recommendation there is to encourage the use of conservation subdivision. So if that area was to develop, to use smaller lots, more green space, and again, trying to push the investment back to where the utilities are already located and to protect that watershed. The next one was to develop the greenway system, and again, through public and private partnerships. If you remember, when we looked at the Moorhead West plan, we talked a lot about the Mallard Creek Greenway coming through there, the Cross Charlotte Trail, and how those match up and how those businesses could benefit from the greenways being there, and how eventually that could become some tourism dollars, depending on what locates next to there. The greenways seem to be the easiest way and the cheapest way to provide for some additional recreation space. So trying to figure out where does that happen and implementing the plans that we already have. So with the Carolina Thread Trail, the commissioners have already adopted that plan. That was incorporated into our Parks and Rec master plan. So really just trying to figure out where does it make sense to build those pieces to where you can make those connections where ultimately you may get some of those tourism dollars, or just some traffic there, so that development, when it comes, then you have some eyes on the greenway. The next one was to develop a strategic mobility plan, trying to get people to think differently. Everybody thinks they need to get in the car. So instead of getting in the car, can you take the bus? Well, there really aren't any bus stops over in this particular area. So if you can't get on the bus, do we have different options? With the light rail now coming up to University City, there are a lot of opportunities to make those connections. CK Rider now has a connection that I believe comes down 29, goes back up 85 to get some people to the light rail. But how do the people in this particular area, how can they utilize those services? Again, a lot of the subdivisions are out. You would have to get to the downtown. And then with the double tracking project, there is still some talk about placing a rail station in Harrisburg, which would be huge for the town if that happened. It's not just about planning for roads. How do we plan for alternate ways for people to get from place to place? Investing in complete streets. This is something that you will find probably in any type of a planning, long-range plan. Again, and it's to set up the streets so that you can have pedestrians, cars, and bicycles all using the same facility. Whether that is, a multimodal path that happens next to the facility, or it's a sidewalk and then maybe a shared bike space. But again, looking for that overall, how do we move people around besides just in the cars? So some of the recommendations would be to, invest in the complete streets. When the developers come in, have them build out the complete street instead of, maybe the town coming back in and putting in the sidewalks. So looking at that, how do we make that happen? And then the last one, and this was a big part of discussion, the town is currently in the process of renegotiating their water contract with Concord. There are some terms out of that with the IBT. One of the issues we think is maybe that people need to be re-educated. There currently aren't any, for lack of a better word, there are no penalties in this particular area if you use town services. There's no tiered system, so if you want to irrigate your lawn every day, you pay the same rates as you would just if you were using that water at your house. So a lot of discussions about water, again, trying to get the development back to where the utilities are, but if the water is not available, ultimately then that would stop development. So how does this happen? If we're now currently bumping up against the 1.6 because we're at 1.4 at peak when people are irrigating, how can we teach people, there are better ways to do this, different types of grass, there's ways to reuse the water. How do you get people to understand we're not going to be able to grow and expand the base if the basic services are not there? So this was a big piece that came out of that, and the town is probably, going to take on some homeowner education. There are some groups already in Harrisburg that are trying to do that. Again, conservation efforts and kind of re-educating the public about what it means when everybody's irrigating at 4 o'clock at night because they're not going to get a ticket. And those are all the slides that I had. So as part of this, as you're looking through the documents, if you have any questions, please feel free to give me a call. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have now. And we will need to hold a public hearing. And as part of that, you would receive public input as well.
So one thing I wanted to add to this is from a larger point of view, Cabarrus County's not adopted a single countywide comprehensive plan for the whole. We adopted a comprehensive plan for the entire county back in 1989-90 and haven't adopted that entire county plan since then because we chose to go with smaller areas. to coordinate with the municipalities or coordinate with the townships so that we could look more specifically in an area. Because frankly, there are big differences between the far northeastern part of the county and this western part of the county. So it allows us to take a more precise view of this, and it allows us to work with the towns, because what happens in the towns then affects our services. Obviously, the growth that occurs in Harrisburg, Concord, Kannapolis, Midland, Mount Pleasant, and Locust affects the provision of school services. How we provide water and sewer throughout the county affects development. So it pays, or is better for everyone if we combine and work with the towns. And that's why we've been working with Harrisburg on this, and why we've worked in the past with all the towns in the county to do this. And we also we don't just do this on land use plans. We've adopted a countywide water and sewer master plan along with the Water and Sewer Authority. We have a livable community blueprint, which was all the communities coming together to look at parks and recreation and open space. We're working on a transportation plan that, particularly for mass transit or for transit services, that will affect the entire county. So we do it by subject area and by land use area, because we think it's more efficient and effective for the citizens. So I wanted to point that out because I know there's been some questions. Why is the county and Harrisburg adopting a plan together? Well, after this, we are ready, and Susie, I think, has her work plan that we move through the county and we continue to re-adopt plans with the other municipalities. Or in some cases, we just work with them on their plans as they're doing those.
Okay, questions for Susie or Jonathan? Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we now move to the approval of our regular meeting agenda, and you all have a copy of that in front of you. Do we see any corrections or additions to that plan? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the regular meeting agenda, including the required public hearing. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes. We do have need of a closed session tonight, so at this time I would entertain a motion to go into closed session to discuss pending litigation, economic development, acquisition of real property, and personnel matters per North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11 A, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes, and we are now in closed session. Thank you.